Please note, we would have preferred for this meeting to have been in person. However, due to the events of COVID-19 and to ensure we all remain safe and healthy, this method of meeting virtually was scheduled. The Broadway Market is a part of the East Side Corridor Economic Development Fund, so stay tuned for a fall 2020 community engagement event. Other targeted investments and upcoming community engagement dates in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood also include the Central Terminal, which will begin community engagement starting this summer through the winter of 2021. And the contact person is Monica Pellegrino, and her information is here for you on our screen. And for those of you who are listening in, Monica at buffalocentralterminal.org or 716-754-6142, extension 202. We also have the East Side Commercial District program in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood. First rounds of awards to be announced soon. And the contact person for that is Brianna, who can be reached at BBYANDAGARA@780fillmore.org, and all of her contact information as well as on that screen for you to see. And for those of you who are listening in, we will give information for you to be able to get this information directly emailed to you, or we'll make sure that you have it for future references. There is more information at the buffalobillion.newyork.gov website, as well as the eastsideavenues.org website about these upcoming engagements and the investments to the Broadway Fillmore area. So just to recap the importance of tonight's meeting and why we are here. In order to help rejuvenate the city of Buffalo's Broadway market as a sustainable and vibrant year-round shopping hub, the state of New York, through Empire State Development, has dedicated several $1 million to enhance the city of Buffalo's recent investments to the existing market. The goal is to develop the market as a focal point for the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood and eventually as a regional attraction. The market historically has played an important role as a center for year-round, international, owner-operated, affordable, fresh, and prepared food shops and neighborhood services. As the neighborhood around it has changed, the market is now seeking to maximize its relevance to the surrounding neighborhood and to expand its customer base in order to serve as a sustainable stimulus to neighborhood development, as well as an attraction for the region. After the presentation, we will open for discussion from all participants. If you are joining us by Zoom on your computer or phone, you may use the raise hand feature to be recognized to give feedback, as well as type comments in the chat box that will be read during the meeting. If you are calling in by phone, we will recognize your participation and allow you a fair time to comment and join the discussion also. Our meeting is being recorded, so we may ensure we have documented all information important for our final report. The recording may be shared for those interested and may have missed tonight's meeting. I would like to introduce Antonio, a partner of CJS Architects, who is serving as the lead on this project. Antonio?
Thank you, Janice. I just wanted to take a moment here to pass along Bob Stark's apologies. He was scheduled to be here this evening, but if some of you were caught up in the big rainstorm that passed through the area probably about an hour or so ago, his power went out at his house. So he's out of no internet access and no power. So I'm giving some introductions on his behalf. But again, I'd like to welcome everybody for attending this evening, taking some time out of your schedule. Your input is something that we're really looking forward to hearing. It's going to be very important in terms of how we start to envision what the Broadway market can be. Just a little background first. CJS Architects is the lead of the current team that I'll introduce in a moment. We responded to a request for proposal from ESD late 2019. And as a result of that, we've been tasked with essentially developing three basic tasks. the first task is really to develop a business plan for the Broadway market, and the second task is to develop a marketing plan. And then the third main task is more on the design side, is related to developing conceptual ideas of how the market can be organized, how it can become revitalized, and some potential understanding of some test fit options that we can develop for the market as we keep moving forward to envisioning its future. So as part of our team, we've engaged, amongst others, you just heard from Janice McKinney from Developments by GEM, who's leading our community outreach portion of our effort. And also we've engaged Aaron Zaretsky from Public Market Development, who's Aaron's one of the premier, if not the premier, expert on public markets. He can give you a little bit of background himself on his own expertise, but Aaron's been doing this for a long time, and he's worked on, I think, about 30 different public markets, if not more, in terms of developing business plans and marketing plans. So Aaron's going to take a little time here to kind of run through just some background on what public markets are and how they vary from, say, farmers markets. And he's going to try to just pose some questions to all of you in attendance to again, gather your feedback. So with that, I'll pass it over to Aaron.
Thanks so much, Tony. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming between the storm and COVID and everything that's been happening in the world. This is not an easy time for you to donate your time to hear about the Broadway market, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to do that. Christopher, if you can go back to the first slide, that would be great on the presentation. And yeah, right there. So the Broadway market has been around for, since the turn of the century. In its day, it was incredibly successful, and it really served the local neighborhood, which was primarily Polish. As the neighborhood changed, the Broadway market hasn't changed very much. There's a lot of problems. It doesn't have the kind of vitality and customer base and offerings that would make for a public market. But I think what we're committed to doing is trying to define that and make that happen with a lot of help from the Empire State Development. Next. So historically, the Broadway market was really the center of the community. It was the commercial center of all of Buffalo. If you read the quote on the bottom, no, the market is not a quiet place. In fact, it's noisier than a newspaper's editor room or a boiler shop, oceans of foodstuff, and a babble of tongues, laughter, and invitations to buy. That's a quote from 1931. That's not how you would describe the Broadway market today, and our goal is to bring that back. Next. So public markets, by definition, are exciting, colorful, interactive, entertaining places. The secret to what makes public market work can be told. I spent about 15 years as a director at a place called Pike Place Market in Seattle, which is the largest and most successful public market in the country. I was a director. And the Pike Place Market enjoys about 15 million customer visits annually. And we were trying to understand why that was, why it was so extraordinarily successful following its renovation. And we did a customer intercept survey at the local mall and at Pike Place Market. We asked two questions. We asked, why are you here today, and how much did you spend? And the answers really gave us the answers that we were looking for. When we asked, why are you here today at the mall, 94% of the respondents said, well, I'm here to buy a vacuum cleaner bag or something like that. This is the place to buy it. When we asked the same question at Pike Place Market, only 24% said, I came to shop. They came for the color, the excitement, to meet a friend. They came for fundamentally social reasons. They came because it was exciting, it was interactive. It was a place where they could teach their kids that meat didn't come in styrofoam containers and that plants actually grew in the ground and they could meet farmers. It was an exciting and dynamic place. Nobody would describe the current Broadway market in those terms, but I think that's, you know, that's the secret to what makes for a successful public market. Next. So the idea of public markets isn't a new idea. This isn't some newfangled theory. If you go back to the dawn of civilization, as people started coming together in cities, the place, when you excavate the ancient Mesopotamian Valley and in Baghdad, the first thing that you come upon is the place where producers and consumers would come together to trade. So public markets have been around since cities have been around. Next. Public markets are different than farmers markets. Farmers markets, you know, can, in many places are thought of as a particular type of public market, but farmers markets are primarily grown foods. They're seasonal. They're often open one day a week. There's no permanent building. There's no, typically they supplement the vendor's income. They're typically outdoors and they're relatively inexpensive to create. Public markets, on the other hand, next, are primarily fresh food with some prepared food. They're year-round. They're open 5, 6, 7 days a week. The vendors aren't supplementing their income. They're able to support their families. They're in permanent buildings. They often have an indoor and outdoor component, and they're expensive to create, and they're a pain in the behind to create, but they're worth it. Next. The important thing about public markets is they exist to fulfill public purposes. They're owner-operated businesses. There's no chain stores. There's no franchises. They reflect what's unique about their communities, and they serve their neighborhoods' everyday shopping needs. Next. The fresh foods are typically rounded out by prepared food, crafts, and critical neighborhood services that are needed in the neighborhood. Next. So there's 4 different types of public markets. The Broadway market is what's called a market hall. A public market district, Pike Place Market is an example of that, is a several-acre area where all of the uses are very carefully controlled. It has an indoor and outdoor component, but there's shops, there's stalls, there's day tables where people sell from, you know, by the day. Another type of public markets are these indoor-outdoor public markets where there's a market hall and that has an outdoor farmers market. Next. Farmers markets, as I mentioned, are a type of public markets, but most public markets in the US are not really good examples of what a public market are because they're so different. And then a market hall. And again, the Broadway market is really, as it stands now, is a market hall. And one of the things that we want you to be thinking about is, should we be adding a real farmers market to the Broadway market, and where should that be if we do? Next. So we talked about public markets as existing to serve public purposes. There's a whole new phenomena that's come up in the last 10 years that are essentially public markets as a real estate investment for private developers. And most of those have either failed or they're not nearly as successful for public markets. The privately owned public markets tend to be pretty exclusively upscale. They tend to not respect the notion of owner-operated. They tend to be geared toward a very narrow slice of an upscale, mostly millennial customer base. Public markets, in contrast, have multiple features that are public goals that are important to the community. They serve immigrants. They're typically the place that different kinds, sectors of the community that don't ordinarily rub shoulders come together in a safe and secure environment. They create jobs. They create opportunities for entrepreneurial development. They're fun. They have an educational component. They're important for health and nutrition. They build an arts community and a rural community. They add value to the surrounding neighborhood. They create an important public place, and they create affordable shopping for low-income people. But alongside of that, they're mixed income. They're not just for low income or just for upper income. They're very diverse economically. Next. So again, we talked about the success of public markets being that they're experiential. You know, they have an abundance of colors and smells. You know, right now, when you walk in to the public market, it's kind of past the garbage area and in a dark and not very well lit space. And, you know, the smells are the smells of, you know, dead fish and older meat. And that's one of the things that we hope to change. And, you know, I think it's incredibly wonderful. There's a great fish market and great meat market, but I think they don't belong, and some of the feedback that we've had is that they don't belong at what is the entrance, and that the entrance itself needs to be off of Broadway, which is the main commercial street. Next. So here are some of the things that go into making for a successful market. They need to have a broad variety of food, a broad variety of different kinds of vendors that are oriented toward different customer bases. They need to have public spaces and special events. They need to have kind of an indoor and outdoor environment. They need to be culturally diverse and appeal to different kinds of folks, rich, poor, young, old, gay, straight, all, you know, different ethnic groups, different international groups, and so forth. They need to be well managed. They need to have a strong promotional and advertising program. They need to have a welcoming exterior, which, you know, we're charged with, and CJS is charged with changing the exterior of the Broadway market so it doesn't look quite so much like a fortress, and many of them have a commercial kitchen. Next. So there's multiple benefits to public markets, and I'm not going to, you know, go through all of these. I really want to leave time for comments and discussion from you all, but you can, you know, you can see these public markets often, you know, if they're successful, they're generating literally millions of dollars in tax revenues to the local city and state, and they're tremendously effective at creating jobs. They're an economic engine, and they help show off what's special about a community. Next. So one of the things about public markets is that they can have some tremendously successful businesses. A guy named Zeb Siegel came to us in the early 80s and said that he had bought a coffee roaster at a garage sale and was roasting coffee and giving it away to his friends. And, you know, by God, it was pretty good coffee. We told him to bring it in, and we tasted it, and it was tremendously good coffee. and we rented in this space that's on the right. This is the first Starbucks in the country. It's grown into what you all know as Starbucks today, but it started as a little mom and pop business. There's many other literally multi-billion-dollar businesses. Cascadian Food is the largest organic food distributor in the world. It was started by two women who lived on Vashon Island selling berries. Sur La Table, which sells upscale kitchen supplies, is all over the country. It was started by a single mom at Pike Place Market. Next. Because successful public markets generate substantial income for their customers, they get passed down through the generations. So Three Girls Bakery, as it looked in 1911, as it looked yesterday, it's still owned by the same, it's run by the great-granddaughter of the founder of Three Girls Bakery. Next. One of the things that public markets do, and that really adds to their success, is they celebrate very diverse cultures. So we, at Pike Place Market, we very self-consciously put the Israeli food store next to the Arab souk. And war has not yet broken out, and they've been next to each other doing business and helping each other for 35, 40 years. Next. So one of the secrets, I talked a little earlier about public markets serving a broad sector of the customer base. These were two businesses that we had at Pike Place Market. Kitchen Basics served the low-income elderly population around the market. If you wanted to buy a frying pan for $1.50, that was the place to get it. They were selling overstocked items in seconds and so forth. But if you were elderly and needed kitchen supply, you could get it for a very affordable price at Kitchen Basics. Sur La Table, which has since been franchised and is all over the country, you could buy a $350 frying pan that's hand wrought in copper and so forth. Kitchen Basics paid about 1/30th the rent as Sur La Table. They were both very successful businesses. They were both very critical to the success of Pike Place Market. Next. So one of the things that public markets do is they have a tremendous impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And we'll give an example later in this presentation. But at Pike Place Market, that is now one of the most diverse and successful housing communities in the country. When I started at Pike Place Market in 1977, it had about 5,000 residents in the downtown. Now it has, I believe it's 70,000. You can buy condominiums for $6-7 million, but it actually has more middle-income housing and more low-income housing than it did when we began the renovation. Next. So some of the ways in which public markets help startup businesses to be successful is there's trainings in display and business management and advertising and so forth. They have institutional advertising. So, you can take out a full page ad in the newspaper and half of it is advertising the Broadway market, and then individual merchants are advertising their own businesses, but it makes it much more affordable. It's reliable leases, so a restaurant might have a 20-year lease, a food cart might have a month-to-month lease. The typical mix that tends to be successful in public markets is about a third being startup businesses, a third being businesses that are started by people who have past business experience, and about a third are currently in business. They're basically second locations of existing businesses. And one of the things that I want the people in the audience to think about is that that third that should be businesses in the Buffalo region that are very successful and that need expansion space that might be interested in opening up a new location after the renovation of Broadway Market, and that can really add to the Broadway Market. Who's making the best bread in town? You know, which beer pub might be the best? What coffee shop might be the best? Who has the, you know, most wonderful cheese and so forth? Next. So public markets have an important educational component. At Pike Place Market, we every fourth grader in the county and beyond would have a full day at the public market where we developed a curriculum where they could learn about where food comes from and meet the vendors and the farmers. We would have health screenings, so the public health department would come in and do blood pressure screenings and do health education and so forth. Let me, you know, when we're talking about health, let me stop and just address kind of where we are. A lot of people might be thinking in the back of their heads, you know, well, as you know, and public markets sound like the antithesis of the, you know, what we're being told to fight the COVID epidemic. Well, the reality is that as horrible and devastating as the COVID epidemic is, it's not going to be with us forever. You know, when you think back, you know, the 1917 Spanish flu epidemic, they call it the Spanish flu because it started in Kansas. You know, Spanish flu is no longer with us. Measles is pretty much a thing of the past. Polio is pretty much a thing of the past. So, you know, COVID, as horrible as it is not going to be with us forever. The essence of responding to COVID is isolate, 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 stay in your home, don't go in crowded places and so forth. And, you know, I've been talking for the last 10 minutes about how important the social interaction is. Once COVID is a thing of the past, people are going to be desperate to socialize and to mix with other folks. And public markets are one of the most important places for that to happen. Next. So I want to talk next about a place called Findlay Market. Findlay Market, I was hired to do a master plan. Tony had mentioned that I had worked with 30 other public markets. I've actually worked with about 60. But one of the most similar to Broadway Market is the Findlay Market in Cincinnati. Very similar story, kind of a German and Polish neighborhood that moved out, and the residents moved out about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and to come back for the holidays. When I was hired at the Findlay Market, all the housing was boarded up. There were about 7 merchants left. Most of their business was done during the German and Polish holidays. This is what Findlay Market looks like today. It's really, it's literally the second most visited attraction in Ohio. Next. And part of what makes it work is it's very diverse. So, you know, you can buy wheatgrass smoothies literally right next to the place that's selling chitterlings. It's international, it's diverse, and it brings people together who ordinarily never rub shoulders. Next. So this is the way the Findlay Market is located in a neighborhood called Over the Rhine. The slide on the left is what Over the Rhine looked like. And when I did the master plan in the early 80s, the slide on the right is what Over the Rhine looks like today. It's a very diverse community, and what it's done is it's really, you know, tried to hold on to the low-income housing stock. It's not just about gentrifying and moving people out of their homes, but it's about infilling and building a diverse, successful community where people can get to know their neighbors and where it's safe and secure and fun and exciting. Next. This is what it looks like on the inside of the Findlay market. It's tremendously successful. There's, I would guess that probably 40% of the businesses are owned by people who are either African American or part of the immigrant community that's moved into over the Rhine, and at least half of the employees are members of those. So again, it's not just a gentrified place. Next. So these are some of the questions that we want. This is the last slide. Now I want to raise some questions that I want you to pay special attention to, and then I'm going to really turn it over to the people who know best about the market, which is the community leadership, the residents, the merchants who are in the audience. One question is, and partly the questions that I'm asking are really led by, at this point we've had maybe 5 community meetings, both in person or 6, or online. Part of the feedback that we've gotten is that the Broadway market needs to do a good job of serving the entire neighborhood, the Broadway Fillmore district, but also needs to be a regional attraction, serving all of Buffalo and the greater region. One of the things that several people have suggested is that we recruit international groceries. If people are familiar with Buffalo Fresh, I think, does a tremendous job at serving the Muslim population in the area. There needs to be places like Buffalo Fresh that are part of the overall mix of the Broadway market that fill up so much of the empty space, that are serving the African American and African community, that are serving the Asian community and the Bangladeshi community and the Burmese community and the Italian community, and certainly keeping and enhancing the businesses that are serving the Polish community. So it needs to be much more of an international mix than it is now. You know, now there's 5 or 6 places to get pierogies, but not a lot of other businesses that appeal to the folks who live in the neighborhood. One of the things that has been suggested is changing the name to the Broadway International Market that reflects that connection to the neighborhood. Love your feedback on that. Good idea, bad idea. One of the things that I want to check in with the audience is, should there continue to be a primary emphasis on fresh and prepared foods that reflect the community and serve the entire region? Do we want to add a real farmer's market? I know that there was kind of a half-hearted attempt, I think about a dozen years ago, to do a farmer's market, but my sense is that, you know, none of this is going to happen without a major rehabilitation of the entire Broadway market building. You can't, you know, expect, you know, people to come to the Broadway market as it is now. There needs to be major changes to the overall building. And one of the questions that I have is, you know, I want you to think about if you were, you know, the queen or king of the Broadway market and you could do anything you wanted, you had an unlimited budget, what are the changes that you would make? I mean, some of the things that we've heard is there needs to be a real dramatic entry. We need to move the police from what is the prime location in the market that probably should be the entryway. You know, do merchants need more storage? What should we be doing up on the roof? We need to open up the exterior for stores as well as the interior stalls. We need to move the fish and meat to prime exterior locations so they have washable surfaces and floor drains, and they can prevent the smells through the roof, etc. What would you do if you had an unlimited budget and we're going to remake the Broadway market? You know, what do you think about those suggestions, and what else would you do? And I think filling up the market with diverse tenants, serving different sectors of the larger community and different economic groups is what we've heard from people. And finally, please, in the, you're going to hear about a way to ask questions. When we get to the question and answer part, we'll have part of it live and part of it afterwards. That the written part of it is going to be open until I think June 30th, or Janice or Chris, you can correct me if that's wrong. But send me suggestions, send us suggestions about second locations that need to be part of the public market. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Please, if you want to direct your questions toward any of us, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. We actually already have some questions and comments.
Great.
I just want to first recognize Joanna, who is on the line with us from Empire State Development, who is the project manager for the Broadway Market Revitalization Plan. Also to thank and welcome Councilmember Nowakowski, the Fillmore District Council member, as well as Kathy Peterson, who is the current market manager for the Broadway Market. And Councilmember Nowakowski and Kathy have both been phenomenal as far as assisting us with getting the word out, coordinating to make sure that we really hear the voice of the community. So I know I'd like to thank you, and they're very committed in seeing the market enhanced and to definitely serve the community that is currently around it. The presentation, tonight's presentation, will be online. I had also sent an email out in the chat that if someone would like to receive it, we can email it to you, but it will be on the website of the Economic Development Corridor, but it will also be online for you all to see. So we do have some comments and questions. You guys could just continue to send them. I'm just gonna read them. I mean, if someone has some comments, please, Christopher will help me also manage those also. So the first comment was, more entertainment to catch the wandering public. Another question, Aaron, this is probably for you. What are some examples of successful public markets that are not walkable for residents who hold the majority of the wealth in their city? So that's a question.
That are not walkable?
Yes, it says, what are some examples of successful public markets that are not walkable for residents who hold the majority of the wealth in
that residents don't have to walk to? I mean, one great example, which happens to be my favorite public market in the country, is Granville Island in Vancouver. They get over 10 million customer visits a year. They're literally, almost nobody can walk to Granville Island. People take boats, they drive, they take Uber, they get there in many, many different ways. But because it's on an island and the entire island is developed as the public market and compatible public market uses, it's probably, the best market in all of North America. But there are plenty of other examples.
Okay. We have another comment from someone who oversaw the African Heritage Food Cooperatives Black Business Bazaar, and they comment that there are plenty of local vendors that this would be a great platform for. And we definitely would welcome that, because I think to the presentation and the recommendations, we want to be sure that the market is as diverse as possible. Next question is, go ahead,
Janice, do you know the address or email, or how to make that connection with them?
I can find that out. That's not
okay.
A problem.
I'll follow up. Thank you.
Yep. The next question is, this is from John, and I'm sorry, I will give people's names just in case someone wants to reiterate what their question is. Does the neighborhood make the public market, or the market makes the neighborhood?
Great question.
Yep. And then it says, should the city spend the money on Jimmy Griffin style housing info project in the Fillmore district to make the neighborhood safe, for outer suburbanites or put the money into the market to spark private investment near the market?
Yeah, my experience with Findlay Market, as well as about a dozen other markets, is that they're obviously dependent on each other and they're interactive, but you know, no community has unlimited funds. And when we did the Findlay Market renovation, it was really, we focused first on making the public market wonderful and enticing. And then slowly all of the housing which had been boarded up and the retail which had been boarded up in the neighborhood started opening up and trying to take advantage of the people who were flocking to the public market. It was really the same at Pike Place Market. You know, when I was a director, we spent $65 million renovating the market first. And once the market was renovating and 15 million people a year were coming, developers started investing in housing, and businesses in the area started opening up. So it's really, the answer is that the market makes the neighborhood, but they're obviously, you know, they're interactive.
Okay. I wanted to know the results of the feedback provided via the past community input sessions. Aaron, you answer, I answer, doesn't matter to me.
Go ahead, guys.
Okay, well, I think the feedback has pretty much been the same. There is a lot of hope and love for the Broadway market. People are just looking for or hoping for the enhancements. So for instance, we've had several tenant meetings where tenants are very committed to the market, but in order for them to survive, they need to have the customers to come into the market. So I think the enhancements of, you know, what Aaron has discussed and other markets around the country have been successful. The market has to reflect the community. The market has to, you know, market, you know, advertise, things like that. So the input has been, I feel, even though some of it is not, it's not negative in the way that people don't like it, but it's just some of the things and the challenges that we need to overcome as a whole, the city, the state, the community, in order to bring the market back to what, you know, it used to be in regards to being successful. So the next question or comment, excellent presentation. In your opinion, how does a market in our situation attract more business?
I tried to answer that by talking about making the building much more vital and exciting and accessible. Right now, it's kind of gray and you know, feels a little bit like a fortress. Adding more tenants, adding international tenants, changing the mix, appealing to the customer base that exists in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood, better lighting, better, you know, there's a lot of physical changes that need to be made to make it welcoming and safe and smell good. You know, when you walk into a successful public market, you want to say, wow, you want to be assaulted with good smells and good sights and, you know, hear a street musician, and, you know, it should be very experiential. It should be really fun. And there should be a sense of safety. Right now, the Broadway market, you know, that doesn't describe the Broadway market, but it certainly can.
Okay, all right. Next is, I see your Cincinnati photo, the train station is nearby, and that similar situation to Broadway Fillmore District. But our train station is even better. Although it isn't operating as a train station, there is also a leading theater company touring space nearby. Any thoughts on how to integrate those?
Tony, do you want to take that, since you guys are taking the lead on the station?
Sure. So this is Tony Borgese. I think well, there's one thing to remember. You know, we're focusing on a very, I'll say, quote unquote, small, right, problem, which is the Broadway market. So while there's a lot of great comments here and thoughts that relate to broader topics related to the neighborhood and how to create a synergy, I think if folks remember the first slide that we had up as it relates to a lot of the other endeavors and programs that Empire State Development is investing in as they relate to the East Side Avenues project, as well as the Central Terminal proposal or project that's also going to be concurrent with this one, running concurrently. There's a lot of different things that are going to be looked at more of a neighborhood level. Now, granted, we're also thinking about the neighborhood and how we can revitalize the neighborhood, but we're probably looking at it more from a specific building standpoint, rather than more of a looking at what to do in and around the neighborhood. So we're probably a little bit limited from that standpoint. But those other projects that I mentioned will certainly be looking at potential synergies between various institutions such as Torn Space or Central Terminal, to see if there are ways to further revitalize the East Side, particularly in and around the Broadway market.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Tony. So the next question comment is this is from Eric, is the market linked to any of the Buffalo tour groups? Creating a tour along with Corpus Christi, St. Stan's, and Central Terminal, ending with a drink and a lunch at the Broadway market would be great. I don't believe that, I'm not sure. I don't know, maybe Kathy or maybe Councilmember Nowakowski. I'm not aware of anything, but that is a great suggestion. And I think something, again, that we're talking about that brings people to the market. Okay.
Certainly,
Yep.
the business plan will have a list of recommended tenants, and certainly a part of that list, in addition to all of the international components and the fresh food components, will be a strong entertainment component, a strong restaurant component, prepared food stalls, many other kinds of uses beyond what's there now.
Okay, thank you for that. This is from Robert Shibley. Can you describe some of the different models of governance that manage the retail mix, the full richness of program possibilities, and the social ecology of the place? I think of Pike Place's Market Foundation and its interactions with other aspects of the market business model.
Yeah, I was the founding executive director of the Pike Place Market Foundation, so I know a little bit about it. Management of the market is really critical, and I think that Kathy, the market manager, has done the very, very, very best job that could possibly be done with almost no resources and very little support. There is a model that works. Right now, the market is housed in the real estate division of the city. There's not, my sense is, and the feedback that we've been consistently getting at the other community meetings, is that there's not a lot of knowledge about what a public market is and what a public market can do. And there is a model that works that I'll be describing in the business plan, but in short, I think that the market needs to stay in public hands, but it needs to be managed by either a nonprofit run by a board of directors, or something called the Preservation and Development Authority, which is run by a board of directors. It's a quasi-public corporation. The kind of board of directors that you need mixes community representation, public representation, vendor representation, and so forth, but also has an accountant and an attorney and a property manager, commercial property manager, and somebody who's an expert in marketing and advertising and so forth. So it's a mix of people with very specific skills and important community representation.
Okay. All right, thank you. This is from Lindsay Taylor. As a real estate broker and heavily involved in the arts entertainment industry, the market needs to be attractive in that arts entertainment for all. So do we have a detailed plan of what will happen in the market, and how will it include our genres of music, art, and culture?
Yeah, I think music, art, and culture are critical to the success of the public market. I'm currently working on a business plan that seeks to address that. But the arts and culture piece has many aspects. You want street musicians, you want to carve out a space for a working artist who is actually making something that people can watch being made that ends up being displayed in the market. You want banners hanging from the high ceilings reflecting Buffalo's rich history with public markets. You really want to integrate the arts and culture into the market, and the business plan will help describe how to do that.
Okay. From Kathleen Murphy, it sounds similar to the West Side Bazaar, but on a grander scale. Is Buffalo big enough to support multiple markets?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of cities actually that have multiple markets. Buffalo, I've just recently been doing some of the history of public markets in Buffalo, but I think there were like 16 operating simultaneously. And one of the things about public markets, because they are fun and exciting, people will drive by 2 or 3 supermarkets to buy their fresh food at the public market because it's exciting and fun. So it's not particularly, and then they'll go off and buy their, drugs and paper goods and, cans at a supermarket. It's not an either or situation, it's both.
Okay. 2 questions from Jared. The building needs to be accessible. This is more of a comment. The building needs to be accessible. The building needs to be accessible for all work shifts during overnight. It could be a good space for catering, to use the kitchen for prep. Also, it has space enough to use for pop-ups and special events. Then his question is there a Broadway market board that would help bring in fresh new merchants and vendors?
There's not currently, but there needs to be, and that'll be one of the recommendations in the business plan. What was the first part of the question again?
The first part of it, he talked about, and I'm sorry, let me go back up. He talked about, I lost it. Basically it being open later and being accessible.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
One of the things the business plan will address is how to group tenants. So, for example, you want restaurants to be open, you might have a brew pub selling wood-fired pizza and 50 different kinds of international beer that wants to be open till 2 o'clock in the morning, or whenever the closeout time is from in Buffalo. But you want, these are owner-operated businesses. They want to be able to go home to their family at the end of the day. You don't want all the businesses to be open at 2. So the hours of operation clearly need to be addressed, and it clearly needs to be a place where people who work can go either before work or after work.
Right.
But it needs to be respectful of the fact that these are owner-operated.
Okay. All right. Comments, yes, need fresh food, but need education around it. A question from Adriana Viverette. For tenants, will there be a requirement that they are residents in the city of Buffalo?
The answer is absolutely not. At Pike Place Market, we actually had somebody, this was in Seattle, we had somebody flying in during maple syrup season, flying in from Quebec. And we actually did a farm inspection to make sure that they really, that they weren't just buying and reselling maple syrup. But people come from far and wide to be merchants in public markets if they have the customer base to support it.
Okay. This is from Eric Sander.
I'm sorry, Janice.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I just piggyback? Thank you so much. Just want to piggyback off that comment. But Aaron, I did speak with Kathy in the market, and I do think that there is a space where we could have vendors, in a certain proximity around the market and give them a reduced rate of rent so that we can encourage those folks that live around the market to be able to have pop-ups and be able to afford it.
I think having a differential rent structure is key to the success of the public market. If you think about it, any mall has a differential rent structure. They charge Sears a lot less money per square foot than they charge, the vendors who have small shops or pop-up vendor spaces. Public markets sort of turn that on its head.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right, Mitch.
Okay. In order to bring, this is also from Eric, in order to bring in vendors, is there sufficient parking / dock space for them to unload their goods and then park nearby while they're working at the market? Is distance, road signage directing people to the market a part of this plan?
If the question is there that now, the answer is absolutely not. If the question is, will that be recommended? The answer is absolutely yes. I mean, think about it. The market has an infrastructure that is essentially based on the 1930s and 40s in the market's heyday. So, if you want to get to your storage area and you're a merchant, you have to walk down to the basement. There's no elevator. If you want to, walk into the market, you have to go by 50, individual garbage, plastic garbage containers, rather than having one, 10-yard compacting garbage container that is properly enclosed and that has controls for the smells coming from it. I mean, part of the problem with the market is that there's not a lot of, there hasn't been a lot of investment on the part of the city, and that the infrastructure hasn't changed very much since 1940.
Okay. Just from Todd, yes to the idea of a not-for-profit model for management. So he's in agreement with that. I don't know if we answered this, I apologize. This was from Martin. Excellent presentation. In your opinion, how does a market in our situation attract more businesses? I think you may have answered that.
Well, it's a chicken and egg. I mean, it's not going to attract more businesses unless there is serious physical changes to the market. It needs to be an attractive, safe, fun place to be able to attract more businesses. But once that happens, I've never worked, I've worked on about 60 different public markets. I've never had a situation where we didn't have an excess of merchants to choose from once the market was properly managed and properly, the physical changes that markets often need were addressed. And we're also going to be, I mean, part of the suggestion that many people have made is finding some of these international stores that are like Buffalo Fresh for the Muslim community for different international groups. That may take actually, working with someone who has experience in recruiting businesses. But part of the way we're going to find these businesses is by, the people who are listening now sending in suggestions for second locations of existing businesses.
Okay. We have Marva. How will the revitalization of the Broadway market bring about the floundering and neglected neighborhood around it? So how will the revitalization of the market basically improve the surrounding neighborhood?
Yeah, again, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. As we already discussed the fact that, historically, when you fix up the market and customers start coming, then the private sector starts making investments in the surrounding community. And that needs to be regulated and controlled to make sure that people aren't, forced in their homes. But there's a lot of empty space in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood. And what happened, at least at the Finley market in Cincinnati, is that all of these empty spaces, all of these boarded up retail businesses and houses started getting redeveloped and filled with people.
Okay. From Tyler, we have question. What is the priority in the development of the market? Sustainability or local community focus or balance? I'm sorry, sustainability or local community focus or balance?
I didn't hear the last word.
Okay, focus. So sustainability or local community focus or a balance. Hello?
Yeah, I'm still not getting.
Aaron, she's saying balance.
Oh, balance. Okay, got it. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Nope, that's fine.
I think you want a balance of different, I mean, you definitely want a strong representation of tenants that both serve and are owned by community residents. At the same time, it's not just for community residents. I think if it's going to be successful, it needs to be a regional attraction. It needs to be something that people come from all over the area because it's fun and exciting, and you can get unique ingredients that you can't otherwise get. But you can't, that doesn't happen overnight. Let me make clear that what we're talking about, we're at the start of a long road. This is not going to happen. This is not going to be easy. This is not going to be, snap your fingers and, nobody's going to write out a check for, the $100 million to make this happen all at once. This is going to be, an incremental process. But if you don't know where you're heading, you're not going to get there. And I think we need to start down that road.
All righty. Question from Greg. What has been done since our last meeting? I've seen a couple of vendors have left. Has there been an attempt to retain them? Will some of the ideas start getting implemented?
Again, we're in the middle of a COVID epidemic where people are afraid to go into indoor spaces, rubbing shoulders with other people. That's really, hard to run a successful business during that time. I mean, I would expect that Kathy, the current market manager, has the contact information for the businesses that have not been able to sustain through the pandemic. And, we will certainly try and contact them once things get better and once some of these changes are made to try and, see if they're willing to come back. Now, they may be coming back selling, different products that fit more with the direction of the market. But, if they've been in the market, then they need to be honored and protected.
Okay. I want to ask Chris, do I have anyone who's called in that is looking to maybe ask a question? I think I've facilitated all the questions and answers as well as all of those comments and questions in the Zoom chat room.
No, Janice, at this point, we don't have anyone calling in. I do see a few more questions in the Q&A, but let me know if you're having trouble seeing those.
Just one moment. I think they just popped up, so that's not a problem. Comment, the infrastructure around the Findlay Market was left intact and the neighborhood came back. The east side continues to let buildings fall into disrepair and not hold slumlords accountable. There seems to be more money to gain in demolishing the buildings, unfortunately need to protect the building. So that was just a comment. To create space for a farmer's market, the parking lot on the corner of Gibson and so I'm sorry, I don't want to pronounce this wrong, and Sinquith streets needs to be opened up and turned back to the city or market control. It's locked up. Best space for a farmer's market. And that was from Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know if I'm missing anyone else. I don't see anything else, Chris. So.
One suggestion that's been made that I would love some feedback on, both as a location for the farmer's market and as a creation of a new recreational space. I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, but I'd love some feedback on, is to close, is it Market Street at the end of the market, opposite Broadway, and to see if some of the green space that adjoins that and turn that whole area from the houses to the facade of the market into a green space that contains the farmer's market as well as the various neighborhood amenities. Good idea, bad idea? Is it Market Street that I'm talking about?
I don't think it's Market.
It is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Yep. I don't see anyone. While if someone's going to answer There is a question about what do you think can be done with the kitchen at the market to best utilize it for different purposes?
Yeah, I mean, in other markets that I've worked with, you know, the kitchen really needs to be multi-purposed. It needs to be a place for, you know, Mrs. Jones, who makes the best sweet potato pies in the country, who is selling them off of her porch, to be able to make, you know, 1,000 a day instead of 10 a day, and learn about packaging, learn about marketing, you know, get through the health department, and so forth. It needs to be a place for catering, for community events and special events. It needs to be a place where the staff can go, the market staff can go and have lunch. It needs to be it needs to be multifunctional, and right now it's not.
Okay, Aaron, just so, and I think I'm going to kind of just summarize this question. As we are, again, we're working on a business development plan. What is your suggestions on how do you fund those programs and vendors that are currently there to make sure they survive through this transition to success?
Yeah. There's no magic bullet. Markets that I've worked on have often had 100 different funding sources. Clearly the public sector, city, state, and feds need to really come to the table. So far, the state has been tremendous to work with, but less so. I think that depending on what happens with the election and with COVID, there's going to be, given the high unemployment, public markets have been proven to be the most successful generators of new jobs. There was a study done at Pike Place which concluded that it was literally the most successful capital support project in the country at turning one-time capital support into long-term permanent jobs. But there's also foundations, there's corporations, there's wealthy individuals. It's going to be a whole potpourri. I've raised at this point, helped to raise maybe $150 million. There's lots of funds out there to support these efforts.
Okay, let me try to get this. This is from Carl. His comment in regards to Market Street. Market Street is too far from the market. Plus, you need to travel through a car garage to get into the market. The lot on Gibson gives better access and is more visible from Fillmore. He said that would be his second choice. And then Monica, Monica Pellegrino is on with us, who is the coordinator, executive director for the Central Terminal. And, I don't know if Monica, I think Chris has asked if you want to say something, we welcome you, but how does that Market Street, pose that question again about Market Street and see if we have any other questions. But I think Carl did give his comments on that.
Let me respond to the fact that it's too far from the market. Part of what we're considering is really trying to expand the tenant base in the market, so that the market has 2 levels above the ground floor that could be used for parking. Right now there is an enormous excess of parking. And typically, you don't necessarily want to put all your parking indoors on the ground floor. If that became a functional part, or at least a part of it became a functional part of the market, that would mean that the market would extend to Market Street. But I think the idea is, in any time, in any market that I've worked on, one of the things I'm always looking for is not just what to do with the building, but how to create outdoor space, how to create fun special event space, and a place for bike racks and kids, and maybe even a children's playground or basketball court or whatever it is in the area around the market. And it seems like the Market Street area, both because it's not really a through street and because it's pretty broad. The sidewalks are broad, the street is broad, and if we could acquire the lots that go up against, the green space. They're already, sort of empty lots that are overgrown that go up against the housing. That could become a really exciting outdoor venue, which might be a good alternative for the farmers market. I think the lot that's been suggested, I think we called it the Gibson lot, is a good alternative, and we need to look at that as well.
Okay. And there is one, it's a question, don't know if we really know the answer. Does the market hand out vouchers to customers during Easter and Christmas for free goods and discounts for their next visit during off-peak months? This will encourage them to return. Okay.
I think that's an interesting idea. I think as we reorganize and have a marketing specialist, that's certainly something that we can look at. But the way to bring new customers into the market is by creating a proper tenant mix and filling it with diverse and exciting tenants who are selling things that both reflect the neighborhood and serve the neighborhood, as well as create opportunities for people to buy things that are difficult to access. Having an international market with 7 different international grocers and 100 different stalls creates an exciting experience for people to shop in as an international, primarily food market.
Yeah. Okay. Just double checking we don't have any questions. Carl has a comment. Just 3rd floor could be a plant nursery for sales of plants in the community, plus some food for neighborhood beautification.
Great.
That's a comment. And Lindsay, we did see your question in regards to the market being attractive, arts entertainment. In the proposed plan, that is definitely the spirit of this, that it needs to have all genres of music, arts, culture, of everything, so that it is diverse. There is not a detailed plan at this current time, but this is what we're working on for recommendations so that it can be put into works for implementation.
And if you have suggestions for
Most definitely
in that plan, please write into the Q&A, and we'll
right. Right. Just double checking. If we have any other comments, questions. And I think it's very important that everyone understands that this is kind of a holistic approach. Though we have Broadway Market, Central Terminal, and then the Eastside Commercial District program, it all works together in revitalizing this entire area. And for someone who is a developer, a residential developer, I do understand the challenges and the concerns with, if we're trying to bring businesses into the neighborhood, but how do we attract them when what's around it isn't as desirable? But I think that's how we work together with the city. I think Councilmember Nowakowski is going to be very open to looking at those things. So I believe this is a really good start to coming up with a holistic plan. So it includes businesses, it includes residents, it includes housing. It just has to include everything for it to flourish. And I think the Finley Market, from what Aaron has said, was pretty much an example of what it looks like now for us at the Broadway Market. And now it's flourishing beyond measures. And I believe that with the right team development and just doing the hard work, we did not get to this place overnight. So we are going to have to buckle down and take the time to make sure that it does work. Okay. If there are, I think I have just one more comment. Until things are vibrant and people are coming, how do we, okay, I think I already got that question already. Chris, do you see any other questions or anything? Because if not, I don't want to cut anyone off, but we have put on the screen for you the information where you can reach back out to us. And those emails are there as well as in the chat. We also have an email for questions and answers. So, hello? I think I got kicked out.
Oh, we can hear you.
We hear you, Janice.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't see anything. My screen just went off. So, okay. So if everyone else can hear me and you are able to see the graphic of where to send questions, we will definitely get back to you. We will ensure that we email you a copy of the presentation. Aaron is very open. We'll make sure that he gets any questions, comments, but we really encourage you all to tell us what you think or what do you feel is possible. Definitely Aaron is interested in those businesses who would consider the Broadway market as a second location, you know, that come from diverse cultures. That is very important to our final report. So if there isn't anything else, Tony, do you have anything? Aaron, do you have anything?
No, just that, you know, don't just use the Broadway Market Q&A at cjsarchitects.com. Don't just use that as a place to ask questions. You know, tell us what second locations we need. Tell us things that you heard that you didn't like, or give us, you know, new ideas. You know, put on the Queen or King hat with an unlimited budget and tell us what needs to happen, and, you know, give us your ideas. You know, if we're successful, it's going to be because, you know, we're hearing from and listening to, you know, all of the people in this room and in the broader community. Thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again and have a great night.
Stay safe.
Thank you.